All right, everybody, happy fall. We're getting ready here to do our first round of journaling in the fall 2024 Art Journal Snacks box. And as you come in, we'd love to hear where you are joining us from. I am currently in Healdsburg, California, and it is a little chilly here for Fall California Day. Beautiful color outside. We had amazing clouds, so I've had a lot of input of beautiful fall content today that I'm excited to play with as we do our session. So we are going to go ahead and get started, and I unboxed this journal box yesterday afternoon, but today getting ready to play in the journal for the first time, because I opened it and I took it out of its package, but I didn't even open it up yet because I wanted to show you all the full experience of when you start a new journal. And just a little preview of coming attractions, what we're going to do today. We'll do our regular breaking in a journal, getting it ready. We'll do one material 3 ways and go over the different materials that we received in this box. And then we're just going to play a bit. We're going to play some with the materials. We're going to play some with some fall content. I found some interesting ephemera today in my office that I'm excited to play with, and we will do all of that, and then we'll also do the bonus prompt from the menu. So I'm going to move aside some of my sweet little fall things. How cute is this acorn? I found this outside just before we started, so it had to come in and be a little mascot for today. Okay, so here's the fall journal, and our journals have these lovely little lines on the back where you might choose to write the date that you start it, or maybe you put the season. I've been doing the season, so we'll do fall 2024. Okay, so we've got a good start there. We're ready to go. And before we do any journaling at all, let's go over some of the materials we received. So, of course, every box comes with an ephemera pack, but it also comes with ephemera in the form of the tape that the box is taped up with. So you get this fun Art Journal Snacks logo repeated over and over on there. And I always like to make sure that I peel that away before I recycle the box so that I have a little bit of that ephemera to play with. Then we have the Ecoline Duo-Tip pens, and if these markers aren't already all over your desk, they should be. They're really versatile, and they blend together really beautifully, and I happen to get a really great combination for fall in California, so I'm very excited about that. We got the Art Graph pencil. This is water soluble. If you've not played with Art Graph before, you're in for a treat. And the pencil form here means that it's maybe a little bit less messy. I know we have some people in our group that are not super fond of making big messes. Sorry, everybody. I really like to make messes. But this is a great form for this brush. It's water-soluble graphite, and it's really lovely. So nice brush. Good thing about this brush to note is you've got this pointed end on the back here, which is great for scratching back into things. And we'll play some with that for sure. The Dust Catch Mono eraser, which is, it's a really interesting eraser. It's maybe different than one you've experienced before, but you can get a nice thin line of erasing if you desire. And then the Line Maker pens, I really, really love these. And I think I said this when I did the unboxing. I only have the brown in these, and so I'm very excited to get the black side. And these are, I'm going to say they're kind of, I don't know, they feel more fluid in the ink that they put down. So I think that's the whole idea of them, free flowing, it says. So these are really nice. I find they last really well, and they'll be good for some writing and for some drawing in our journals. Okay. Also, the Mixed Media Art Spray. Again, these are some great fall colors that I got, and just in combination with these, and have lots of fun. If you've not played with these before, you do want to have some things around to protect from overspray. So if you're working on your lap right now, maybe not with these, unless you work with it in a different way, but you might not want to spray it when you're journaling on your lap or in your bed or somewhere that you don't want a little overspray. But these are very fun, and there's lots of different ways we can use them. And then our adhesive this time is Mod Podge matte. And the matte part is really important because in your journal, if you use a gloss adhesive or some kind of gloss glue, you can do it, but it has a tendency to stick your pages together quite a bit more than it would otherwise. All right, and then we've got our ephemera pack. And just a reminder that some things in the ephemera pack are the same for everybody, and some things are different because it's unique ephemera. Get it all out. Yep. So save the envelope because you never know when you might need a little smiley face. And some fun things in the small envelope. Again, also save the small envelope because you might want to use that for something. I had this little airmail vintage sticker and some skeleton leaves and fabric leaves. This is a great little journaling prompt thing. I'm going to stick all these guys back in the envelope because they're little and I might make a little mess today, so I'm going to make sure I don't lose them. I think that thing was not in there, that's why. Save all those guys. It's a nice, this is tissue paper, but it's got a little bit of a gold shine to it. So this you can use this with the Mod Podge. You can tear it or you can glue it down in different ways. It'll be really fun to play with. Some fall pattern paper. This is really interesting. I was really curious about this texture on this paper. So it does have kind of this raised up texture that makes it look like it's wrinkled, but it's actually printed on there. I think that'll be really fun and fallish to play with. And then the page that I got goes from capers to carambola or star apple. Star apple. I want to say that might be star fruit, but I don't know. This is from an older book, but I love this illustration. So that's definitely going to happen. I didn't know that capers, that this is how they came into the world, like with these beautiful flowers. Who knew? Learn something new every day from vintage ephemera and books. All right, so I'm going to put my ephemera paper elsewhere and move these supplies aside. And let's go ahead and get started with probably the most intimidating thing about a new journal. And this is any new journal. It's always going to have this feeling of like, oh no, how do I start? And what if I start wrong? And my solution to that is to just start, right? To just do something. So doesn't need to be page one. Although in my traditional journals, what I like to do is I date everyone the day that I start it and the day that I finish it. With my ArtJournalSnacks ones, I've just been dating it for the season that we're working in it. So I'm not going to do that to this one, but I am going to just flip to a random page. And this is something that might feel a little bit scary, but I'm going to encourage you to go for it. Shake this up to move the pigment around. And I'm going to encourage you to just go for it. Spray some spray on there. Maybe close the page back up. And open it again, and you get this really interesting kind of pattern. This almost looks like it could become a flower. And I'm going to just spray some water in here now. Get this page a little bit wetter. Now I'm going to take the Art Graph pencil. So remember, this is water-soluble graphite, but it will kind of deboss into the paper a little bit, and you can see it's also dragging some of the pigment around. We've recently started a doodling group where I work, and this is reminding me of my fellow doodlers. We just had it today, actually. So before I came home to do this live session, I was doodling. But look how interesting this part is, where the pencil has actually dragged the orange pigment into the line. And then down here, it's almost like it's almost like this part is flowing into the line. So once you start something like this, then you can start to play with it a little bit more. So I'm actually using the pencil almost like a marker or a paintbrush to drag the pigment out of the gutter of the page. And hot tip, this pigment sinking into the gutter of the page is actually going to help you with your white page fear, because as I'm pushing it down into the gutter of this page, it means it's going to bleed through out of the stitched area onto some other pages. Okay, so now I'm going to dip this graphite. I just dipped it in a little water, so I can just start to fill in a little bit of texture here. It's interesting because it's almost scraping away a little bit of the orange pigment. So when I'm working on a page like this, where it really is just about the process and putting marks down on the page, I'm trying not to plan it out too much, but between each decision I make, I think, okay, what is happening here and what parts am I interested in, and do I want to play with that a little bit more? Like, I love what's happening right here where a little bit more water went onto the page, and it almost looks like salt, but it's not. And then this part over here feels a little bit less developed so far. And I think what I'm going to do is switch to a different material. So this is kind of a mixed odds and ends of acrylic paint in a little jar. And by mixed, I mean like the ends of some dried up tubes. But I really like to combine things like this because just making a more interesting texture that can become something else later. So you don't always have to know the meaning or the message of a page when you begin. In fact, I find very often that just following whatever is interesting to me as I'm working on it they end up being my favorite pages. And when I have kind of planned a page out too much, I don't end up liking how it looks. I mean, liking how it looks is all relative, right? Because an art journal really should be about whatever you need it to be in the moment. So I like the way that these colors are playing together, and as it dries, how it's almost intensifying in those pencil lines. And the more that it is drying and developing, you start to not really be able to tell what the different materials are on this page. So I'm very curious about that. And I'm going to set this aside and let it dry for a little bit because I don't want to mess with that too much more. So I'm going to pull out another ArtJournalSnacks journal that I've been playing in. And like, here's another example of something with some good fall colors to it. This is something I was playing with this is ink and a little bit of woven collage. And this is a weird material I was playing with while I was at a conference. And it's kind of part oil pastel, part chalk pastel, part tempera paint stick. They were really interesting and water soluble. Jury's still out on what I think of them, but they did make, I liked the way the colors combined in here. I have the shapes on this made me think of it. I recently found this little bit of something I think it's in a catalog. Yeah, clothing catalog I was cutting up at work the other day, and I tucked it aside because I wanted to incorporate it into something. And since this has a little bit of that play with shape on it, I thought this might be a good spot. But the thing that I don't like about it is I like the letters. I like the switch from a serif to a sans serif font. But I feel like if I just put it in I don't know, maybe it would start to obscure too much. So a couple choices. I could cut out the words a little more closely, but sometimes I find when I've done that I don't end up liking how it looks, because it looks a little contrived, or maybe a little serial killery, if that's a word. So I'm thinking what I might do is distress it a little bit before putting it down on here. So I'm digging through some colored pencil sticks looking for a brown one. There we go. Okay. So don't be afraid to destroy your ephemera before you use it a little bit. So now it's already looking a little bit more like it belongs on this page. I'm just going to rub a little bit of colored pencil onto it. It doesn't really want to stick because it's a glossy catalog page. There we go. Now we're getting some of those wrinkles to show up. Bringing on too soft a surface. Okay. So that already looks, I think, a little bit more interesting. And then the other thing that you can do is layer something else on top of it. So I have this other tissue paper here on my surface that has, it also has some shapes. So it has these interesting little patterns, which kind of play well with this. And it looks like that text will still show through if I put this over top. So let's go ahead and do that. And we'll use our Mod Podge. And I don't like to be wasteful, so I'm going to use that little bit that was left over there and smear that on first. This will also help some of this page stick down a little bit better. I just realized. So this page, because it's woven, things might bleed through to the back side. So I'm going to really quickly stick some wax paper under there. Otherwise, you'll end up with a journal that's all stuck together. So doing this, I'm thinking about the words here. Fall takes shape. I wonder what shape fall takes. I think because of that, with the connection to geometric forms, I'm going to trim this so that I have another shape in the line of the tissue paper going across here. Maybe a little bit more. And these, what will become these subtle changes between the page that was in the journal and the page where the tissue paper has been attached. I can go back in and play with that more later and play up these wrinkles that are happening. And then here, using the back end of the brush we got, I can scratch back into the Mod Podge, which will give me an interesting texture that I can play with later. And will also help me lose the straight line of that magazine paper and help it blend into this page even a little bit more. Put some more squares down here. So I always like when a tool can do multiple things, which is why I like this brush, because it's a very nice brush, but then it can do all these wonderful other things that you've seen me use a pencil a whole lot to do that, to scratch back in, which is fine because, you know, sometimes you want the little bit of pigment that leaves, but this is nice if you don't want to risk any other pigment going onto your page. Okay, so we're going to set that one aside and let it dry. And as always, I need like 10 more desks. Okay. So some of you may have seen my new bird friend. He's not mine. He's a work bird friend. So this is another little drawing of him that I was playing with the other day. And then this journal I made, so this is another one that I'm playing in right now, and I made it modified accordion bound pre-folded book. So same way that you make a modified accordion bound book, but I made it with these folded pages so that I could have all of this extra place to play with. So this is just begging for thin paper, so it's just going to be really, really good for doing some rubbings. And I have a whole bunch of fun leaves, but I also have this really pretty fern that I brought back from a Cobb, which is where a labyrinth is that I maintain. And what I should have done is pressed it in my car before I drove home, but I didn't. So it's just like, it's a really beautiful object. But I think it'll still work to get an interesting rubbing if I put it down carefully. Smash it in here carefully. So of course the center of the fern is going to do a little better. You get these interesting little bumpy areas where the little fern spores are. And one thing I'll say about doing rubbings is the firmer you can hold the paper so it doesn't move around too much. And the more patience that you have, the better rubbing that you'll get. So your arm, your hand should actually feel a little bit tired. This is an art, this is your journaling cardio right now. He said art isn't a workout. Okay, so you can see that it's developed a whole lot more from when I first put it down. And then sometimes I like to go back in with a second color, again, making sure that your paper hasn't moved, because then you'll get a different experience, like a mirrored effect. So I think that actually, for being as curled up as it was, it did end up being very fern-like. And then depending on the leaf you use, sometimes you get this, right? So we have a little bit of the spores from the back of the fern here, which will probably go away, but we also got a little bit of it here. And that one, I think we might be able to have that stay. So we'll see what happens with that. And now my fern is a lot flatter, so I might be able to do some things with Mod Podge with this. So I'm going to pull off a couple pieces of my fern. The flatter ones I can find. And in fall, for many of us, there are so many interesting textures and things around that we can play with. Lots of colors to be inspired by. And even though I'm in California, I am in wine country, so we have so much color here. All the grapevines are starting to turn color. They harvested a couple weeks ago. Okay, so there's a couple good ferns. And sometimes when I'm playing with natural materials, I like to go between the more natural state and then doing something more like a repeated pattern. So I'm going to stick these guys down almost like they're lined up. And with something like this where it's peeling up a little bit, my best hint is to put quite a bit more Mod Podge than you would otherwise on it, and then put a piece of wax paper over the top and then squish it. And then hopefully that'll help it flatten down a whole bunch more. This side I'm going to do spores up and see what happens. I see the comment. I do have a fun job. We have a lot of fun. Okay, so I never like to do things in even numbers, so we need to have this last one on here a little bit more. So you're just trying to have it make enough contact with enough squishy Mod Podge around the edges so that when you put a piece of wax paper over the top, you can flatten it out pretty well. You'll notice that I reuse my wax paper, and part of why I do that is I like that sometimes a little bit of whatever was on there before transfers onto my page. Okay. Flatten that guy out. And I'm going to sit on it so that I can flatten it even a bit more. Okay, let's see where we are here. So this has dried pretty darn well. A little bit of the acrylic is still waiting. But I'm going to put a piece of wax paper in here so that we can turn the page. I'll actually turn a couple pages because I like this that's happening from the pencil line pressing through, so I don't want to lose that. All right, so I wanted to do the one material 3 ways, which we've been playing with, and we've been doing this every time. So I have some vinyl stickers. So we'll do 1, 2, and 3. And for this, let's do the eco lines, because this one is a little bit more of a challenge to think about how to use something like this 3 ways. So of course, the first way is to just use the markers the way they were intended to be used. Just to explore both the chisel tip as well as the fine point. You can see nice, vibrant, juicy color. And then with the chisel tip, you can also use the pointed end to get straight lines, finer lines. And then you can also use the marker like a stamp, right? Which is probably my favorite way to use markers and paint pens. I really love exploring this kind of mark making that you can do. Okay. So that's way number 1, which is of quite a wide range for just one marker to make that many different kinds of marks just in just a few moments. The next thing you can do is explore blending them. So we'll do the big area of this orange. You can see how vibrant the color is. And then take your second color. And I always like to blend towards the thing I want to blend so that you still have that pure color on the other side. Right? And then the more that you play with this, right now, now it's almost looking a little turquoise. And I can go back the orange a little bit. So see how it's different when you blend the blue into the orange versus the orange into the blue. Okay. All right. And then the third way that you can use these is to incorporate a little water media, because these are concentrated and you can blend them a little bit. There's something really wonderful about the sound of a marker on paper. So see how it acts like now like a concentrated watercolor. And these play really, really well with other watercolors. So if you would like to make combinations with colors that you didn't receive, you absolutely have the ability to do that. What I like about just blending water into one color is you can see the whole range that it makes. And you can also see where the water is separating out some of the other pigments that are involved, right? So this is on the pen, on the marker itself, called light orange, but you can see where the water is in there, how the yellow is really standing out. Like even like here looks very yellow. So this almost looks as though I've used two markers to create this wash of color. I guess orange must be my theme for the day because I've used a lot of the orange and all the pigments we've played with so far. Okay. So you can just keep playing with this and seeing like how many colors can I get out of just this one. And then just on the edge here, I'm going to go back in with my blue while the paper is still wet. Now, I wouldn't do this a lot or on a large wet area, but if you're just doing a little bit, you can get this interesting spreading of the color, spreading of the pigment into the still wet areas of the paper. And you can see that it spreads quite a bit, right, where there's more water. Okay. So that's one material 3 ways. And with something like this, you could end up turning this page into something else, like looking at it like here in the little water splatter. But, you know, maybe there's people incorporated into this. Maybe you collage something on the top. So even a page in your journal that feels at first more like an exploration of materials, it has the opportunity to become something else, right? Become something with a larger story or something else that's inside of it. Okay, we'll set this guy aside to dry. I was just asking myself where my third journal was, and then I remembered that I'm sitting on it. It's like Princess and the Pea, but with journals. We'll put a little wax paper into this one. And when I have some kind of glue media or acrylic media, into the gutter of my page. I like to really be sure that I've got a good wax paper stuck right in there. Okay. So let's figure out a way to incorporate a little bit of ephemera with some fall content. So I found this again in a catalog somewhere, and I really liked this as a frame for a page in a journal, because who doesn't want to have meaningful change, but sometimes it feels impossible to get there, right? So like this reminder that little choices, right? That it is within our ability to make little choices. And with something like this, where it seems like you actually really do want most of the words, what I was thinking would be interesting to do is take some leaves. These are from the walnut tree outside my place. Actually, I'm going to turn them on this side because I want to do something else. But I want to make sure that all of my words are covered. But I also want to make sure that I end up with something, an interesting composition. So it's trying to cover the leaves or cover the words, but also have something interesting on the page. So I'm going to put maybe one more leaf over here. Okay. All right. My impulse was to do the green, but I feel like it's more useful to look at what if I did a strange color. Now, if you want to do this and not have it bleed onto your page so much, and again, this is going to create a mess on your surface, so just be aware, but raise it up a little bit higher. So you get a little bit more of that mist. Okay. Now, before it totally dries, I'm going to lift this up. I'm going to stick it under here. I'll lift this one up and stick it on a different page. This one I'm actually going to turn right over, right where it was. Sorry, your fingers are going to get dirty. And this one I'm going to press the leaf down into the page so that I'm transferring the spray. Look how cool that is. And that leaf I can still use for more rubbings. Okay, so now for these other ones, what I'm going to do is take a piece of wax paper so I don't completely get pigment all over my hands. And I'm just going to put some pressure here. If you didn't want to use your hands, you could use something like a brayer for printmaking if you have a rubber one around. Could use a spoon. Okay, so I think that feels pretty good. Put that up. That turned out really well. What I like about doing the art spray on leaves is it's a little bit more subtle. Now I have 3 very pigment covered leaves, but see how really nice this is? It's just really just sitting on those raised up areas. So I'm just going to let these pages close. One thing to know about the art spray, it is an acrylic spray. So where it is pooled on this paper, if I shut this journal right now, these pooled areas might stick, right, to where there's paper. So just be aware of that and be careful of that. I'm going to pull out another material that some of you may remember, the Niji clear, or the no pigment artist crayons that we got a couple times ago. And I really liked the way they felt on paper, so I had to go and get the full color set and have to recommend. Of course, I got some more clear ones too because I really enjoyed those. But with this, I'm going to just go back in and outline these leaf shapes And I like this word create, so I want to embellish that one a little bit more. And the top part of this leaf kind of got a little bit lost, so I'm just going to focus on this line here. And that one I'm going to leave how it is. And then I really like the way that this blue is showing up against the purple and pulling out the blue of the sky. So I'm going to do a little bit more line work with this. So some additional ideas working from this page, working from something like this are, okay, so I've got this interesting quote. What do I do with that now, right? Like, how do I make this a little bit more personal to me? And I have this area here that you might do a little bit of journaling, like with a fine point pen. You might hide it in there somewhere, but like, what does this phrase that I've pulled out of a magazine or this headline that I've pulled out of a newspaper, what does it mean to me, right? Because that's part of what I'm hoping that you're learning from this art journaling process is it's not just about the aesthetics and what it looks like. You know, that's kind of the entry, right? That's what brings you into the making, but then finding ways to have it be meaningful to you and record something about your lived experience or record something about what you're currently thinking about. Right. So if I think about this, like, what are the little choices for me? Okay, so little choices are the way that I decide each day that my work matters and that I'm here to do important work. Underline. Important. So one of the things that can happen when you're journaling is you find yourself repeating words, right? And if I had my professor hat on, I would tell myself, like, you just repeated the same word in one sentence. But it's also a sign to yourself, right? Like, oh, that word important is important, right? So what did I mean by that? And that's interesting. I think that's interesting is a good response to yourself about a lot of the things that you might journal. Right? Okay. So since it just caught my eye and it feels like it wants to be here, I'm going to take a little bit of the ArtJournalSnacks ribbon. It just feels like that wants to go in this spot here. What I like about the ribbon, I think I've talked about this before, is depending on how you rip it, you get a little bit of those fibers that are in it to reinforce, which make this interesting texture on the page. My hands are getting nicely covered in pigment. And I was going to wipe them off, but I don't know where my wipes went. So we'll just go with it. We'll go with the mess. There they are. So I like to keep water wipes nearby. Baby wipes work also, but the water wipes are a little bit better because they don't put any lotion or anything on your hand, no solvent. And you can move on to journal a little bit more without making too much of a disaster of things. Okay, we'll let this pigment dry a little bit.
Hey, Erin, just jumping in here. Let you know we're halfway through class.
Okay, great. Thank you.
No problem.
All right, so we'll go back to this friend here. And This page feels like it wants to have some ephemera on it. So let's see what I've got. I mentioned this one, this page with this, like this new to me learning about this is how capers grow. Which means I'm kind of guilty of the thing that we always used to laugh about when I was growing up. Because I grew up on a ranch, and we had all sorts of animals, including lots of chickens. And sometimes little kids would ask my mom when they came over to the house, well, they'd look at the eggs, and we'd, a fun thing to do was let's go collect the eggs. And the kids would be like, well, how do you know if there's an egg inside there or if there's a baby chick inside there? Which we thought, my brother and I thought was really funny because, we had grown up on a ranch. And so, of course, that if for there to be a chick inside, you have to incubate it and have to watch the incubator and wait for the chicks to hatch. And the child was not asking about this, like, is this a fertilized egg, right? It wasn't about that. It was like really that some eggs have eggs inside and some eggs automatically have baby chicks inside. And I always think about that. But the reason I'm bringing this up is like this idea in my head that, well, like capers come in a jar, right? They've got salty and they come in a jar. And I didn't think about how did they grow and what does the plant look like that they grow on? So kind of doing the same thing. So here's all the text about capers. And I think I am going to include this because it's got some funny words. And we can play with these words a little bit. I think all of these pages came from a book about food history. And my impression of reading through it as I was ripping out pages for you all is, number one, it had a lot of biases in it. Like there were some pages I definitely had to censor and not mail out. And also it was written in this really funny conversational tone. Okay, so I'm going to take a slightly thicker one of these and look through and see if there are funny words and phrases that stand out to me. So this one definitely does. Giving a lift to foods otherwise insipid. So you can see the biases here that are in this text. So when I'm doing this, what I'm looking for is just phrases that stand out to me, and I'm not thinking about, am I telling a story or anything like that. Okay. So I pulled out now the text that is important to me, and then there are lots of other ways that you can treat it, but I'm going to go ahead and, how messy do I want to be? I want to be not quite so messy. So this is matte media mixed with a little bit of black acrylic. And I'm going over this to not completely obscure the text, but make the text that I wanted to focus on stand out a little bit more. So I like to do this sometimes for my journaling practices, to just have something that is pre-blended in a little brush container. So that I don't have to worry about washing a bunch of brushes, and I can easily switch between colors and add new things. This also helps to incorporate this piece from the book into the page. So I don't know why. I don't know what I assumed capers were from or where they came from. Maybe you all are laughing at me right now, but I always enjoy them when they're on something. And occasionally I buy them, but hadn't really thought about them being buds, pickled, unopened buds of the flower. A couple of weeks ago, I went to a restaurant that's all pickled stuff. And it was really fun and very colorful. There were no capers, but now that I know that they're pickled flower buds, it seems like maybe they should be there. Okay. I'm going to go back to my pencil now, and I'm just going to add a little bit more. Since I've already got this gray on this page, I'm just going to add a little bit more texture here. I just wrote the words, things we never think to wonder. I'm a pretty curious person, but it just never occurred to me to wonder where capers came from. So if you ended up with a page from the food history book, you should pick one of those foods and maybe write about your history with that food or what it makes you think of. I'm definitely after this going to do a little bit more researching about capers and all of their ins and outs. I'm very curious about. And then these pages I am going to save because you never know how some of this text might become interesting or important to work with. Okay, so we'll let this acrylic paint dry. And I think we should check in on the journal that I'm sitting on and see how our project is going here. So when you first peel back wax paper from something you're trying to stick, it's useful to do it very slowly. And it does look like this flattened down pretty well. And it also looks like it transferred a little bit of that acrylic over, which I was wanting to do. And this wax paper has served its purpose. But that looks really good. I'm excited about how that's coming out. So on this side, one of the things that I like to do is accentuate the edges. So I'm going to go back to the duotone here. And this was colored pencil, not wax crayon, but it will resist a little bit. And it'll resist even more once I put a little water on here. So sometimes when I do a rubbing from a leaf or another piece of natural material, I like to go back in and make those edges stand out even a bit more. I like how that is coming out. And then with this book, one of the things that I'm playing with is like, how do colors from this part then come into the inside part of the book? So I'm actually going to do that with some of the art spray. And this one, I'm going to spray with the nozzle very close to the page, and I have it held at an angle here. So you can get some fun kind of graffiti splatters with some good drips. And there's a little bit of overspray, but not quite so much. And then this part's up to you. You can let this sit as it is and let it dry, and the pigment will kind of pool in those areas. And because it's an acrylic spray, they will stay there. You could accentuate this a little bit more. And I'm just going to see if that had enough air in it. It doesn't. Okay, so I'm going to blow on this a little. I end up with longer drips. The other way you could do that is adding a little bit of water into this, but I don't want it to soak too much into the page. It's going to show through a little bit. Okay. I'm stacking up journals over here. All right, so we'll put some wax paper on this one so that the acrylic can dry. Get that page. So I wanted to do the bonus prompt. And I'm going to save this, the cover of our menu this time, because I think I want to incorporate it into the cover of this journal. We'll take our bonus prompt and create a journal page inspired by an important person in your life. And I'm going to put this down low. And then I kind of thought it would be fun to have the page incorporate some of the leaves. So this one I'm going to put back here knowing that some of that pigment is going to come through. I'm actually going to have the leaf be kind of the background behind what I'm doing with the person. So for you, you can totally incorporate a photograph of the person, or maybe the person's name, or important things about that person, characteristics about them, things you love about them, where you met them. If that person is alive and around in your world, you can invite them to participate in the page with you. I'm choosing to use the person's name. And then I'm going to do that same thing with the eco line marker up to the edge here. So you can see a little bit of that pigment goes a long, long way, right? And I'm actually going to pull out so this is that glittery black tissue paper. And I'm going to cover this whole page with the Mod Podge so that I can do a couple things. So if I know that I want to put a lot of textures down, sometimes I'll put the Mod Podge down over the whole page so that I can start to stick stuff down and make my composition without stopping in between to put more glue down. And again, one of the things that I really like about using tissue paper is I really like to play up those wrinkles that I'll go back in and play with a little bit more later. Looking for just the right thing. I think this is just the right thing. So pieces like this of cool paper, always save them because you never know when they might be useful for you later. One of the things I find about pages with emotional content, the more you can get out of your own way and just cut without drawing first or without planning and stick things down without planning, the better off you are. Because this is a very textured paper, I do want to come back into it later. So I'm not going to put Mod Podge over the top of it right now. I'm just going to use the Mod Podge to temporarily stick it down so that I can come back later, and probably with the line maker pens, I'll add some drawn details onto this. So that side I'm going to let dry. This side I want to play with a little bit more of something special. This is I've had this for a long time. It's ink with a little bit of shimmer in it, called Heart of Gold, which feels just right for this page. And it'll play really nicely with this black tissue paper with a little bit of sparkle to it. So one of the things that is great to do when you first open your box and you pull out the materials is to see how the materials you received in the most recent box, or if you go to the art store, make a big haul from the ArtJournalSnacks store and you come home with your materials, like how do those materials play with some others that you love, right? So having all your materials make friends with each other is a good idea. And sometimes you'll discover like, nope, those materials don't really play well together. So I'm going to use them separately. Or you might find a combination that is just exactly what you've been looking for. Or it's maybe a favorite material, but it does something different in this new combination that you weren't expecting. page is coming along well. Again, I'm going to save these little odds and ends because they might come in handy later. Let me set this guy aside. I'll come back to this one. Those are going to be really fun to play with. And so is that. So a couple different rounds and a couple different versions to play with that material. So I had something else that I've been saving for a long time. Here it is. I've actually been saving this for a long time because it felt like, oh, it really wants to go in a fall ArtJournalSnacks box. It's got this lovely wood, and then it's got some brushes and some pigment, and we're going to make those words go away. But I just really was excited to incorporate this as the beginning of a fall journaling page. And it might be that some of this text ends up staying, but we'll see how it goes. So when, again, some of you have seen me do this before, when you're gluing a page that's going to cross the gutter, I really like to fold the page first so that I can make sure I get it nicely right in there. And then I'm actually going to cover this whole thing with glue stick, even though I know it's not going all the way to the top of the page, but I'm going to put some more stuff on there that it won't matter. So we'll tuck this right in here. Always make sure you look first to make sure you're getting the part up that you really want up. Some of you have probably experienced this before where you don't get it tight into the gutter, and then when you go to open the page again or open a different page, it ends up tearing, which is not great. Not the end of the world, but it's not great. Okay. So I've got a gold pen here. I think I'm just going to scribble a little bit with that. And I'm going to go over it with some other stuff, but that would be a good starting point. Actually, I think I have a gold colored pencil also. Don't ever get rid of your little odds and ends colored pencils because they come in really handy to just have like in a miscellaneous collection of materials. So then the neat texture that's happening right now is because I put that marker down over colored pencil. Over glue stick. And now the colored pencil is scumbling along the top. There's your art term for the day. So that's the interesting texture that I'm talking about. All right. So I'll trim that later. But one of the things that I can do to show myself where to trim is just darken that edge a little bit. I also get a little bit of vignetting on this page. So this is starting to get there. It's not quite there yet, but I'll keep playing with it and figuring out what else wants to go on this page. I do have a little bit of paper that has a little bit of the right color, but I'm not sure yet. I'm not sure what else wants to go on this page. I just liked this so much, I wanted to find a way into it. Actually, I don't know, maybe they go here. These two look like they would hang out in this colorway, so I think we'll just go for it. So this is from a Sears catalog, an old Sears catalog I was gifted. Thank you very much. And saving this because look at these ladies. They're definitely going to go somewhere. I don't care so much about the fabric swatches, but I'll probably save that just in case. And then what I want to do is find a way to incorporate them in that doesn't lose too much of the image. So I am actually going to cut them out a little bit more. When you're cutting vintage paper, the best thing to do is try to, if you're turning a corner, do it quickly. And try not to hack with your scissors. One thing I could do is figure out where that line is and cut along that a little bit so that part comes back out. Or I could cut here, like peel this up a little bit, cut back into this and set them down so it's kind of coming in front of them, which I think is what I'm going to do. Hold your breath, everyone. We're peeling paper up. This also takes a little bit of art muscle. Okay, so I think I'm going to keep this line. And then we can tuck them in underneath there. So I'll cut a little bit on this side. I'm sad about losing the A and B, so I might cut that off and leave those for something else because I just like the typography of that. Okay, so now we can tuck them in. I want to make sure her hand stays in there a little bit further. Yeah, that's better. Okay, so again, we miss her. That's too bad. It's the hard thing about cool vintage paper from like ads and stuff is that you fall in love with one side and then you cut it and you turn it over to glue and you're like, oh no, now I'm missing this other thing that was so interesting. Okay, we'll just leave, I can see the text from art there and that'll be good enough. We'll just glue this guy back down. Right. That was definitely what that page was missing. And then these little odds and ends, I might find some way to work those in. Yeah, I like that. Just so it looks a little bit less like I just took something out of a magazine and something else out of a catalog and made this page. So it's now it's starting to feel like it's mine. And then even these little textures are kind of interesting and something I'll probably leave on my desk for a little while to possibly play with later. I like how this page came out. And I might pull a little bit of this. It has this like warm sepia. So I feel like it needs a little bit of that up here. I think I have actually. Yeah. A little bit of sepia. This is watercolor ink. I think it's the same color I was using on that other page. So with vintage papers, you never really know what's going to happen if you touch it with water media. So just a thing to be aware of. Sometimes it soaks in and it really spreads around, and sometimes it does something completely different that you weren't expecting. So just be aware. Okay. Cool. Running out of flat surfaces for drying things. So this now has dried, you can see, and it's soaked in. And depending on the paper that you use it on, it'll look more or less matte. And here it showed up pretty matte. So now what I think I want to do is bring a little bit of something orange onto this page, because right now these two pages, as they're facing each other, look like they don't belong. This is orange colored pencil stick. Another little random piece of ephemera that I have is from a a coupon mailer. And I just thought that this was funny to think about incorporating into a journal. Like, your reward is inside, and congrats, your reward is here, because your reward is journaling. So it could be funny to put this in. I'm trying to think what. So I was with an ArtJournalSnacks subscriber when I got this washi tape at the Museum of Rocks and Minerals up in Oregon. And I think the colors of this look really nice with that fern. I'll just make this so it has a little hinge and cover up that, whatever that little code is down there. And then to make sure it turns, I just go back in with scissors and cut it flush to the page there. So congrats, your award is here and you're journaling. Good job. And then because I've added that paper underneath, I'll get like a little hint of it. So when I have a journal that has like little inclusions and envelopes and things like that, I like to give this little peek that, oh, there's something else inside there. So that's really fun. See what other interesting fall bits I have to include before. Okay, here's one. So this is from today, and it's a very unflattering picture because I don't know why places do this when they have security, and they put the screen like way down low. So you invariably end up with a very unflattering picture of yourself. But I went to CCA with one of the residents that I work with, because we're working with them to design our gallery space. And I don't know, there's something about this is leftover. This is paint from a paper plate that we were using as a palette a while ago in the studio. And I just like the marks so much that I've incorporated it into a couple of journals. And those were the little odds and ends that were left yesterday. And I was journaling on my floor and found them. So I stuck them in here, along with some other text that is important and meaningful and has a connection to this ID tag. So the other thing I'm sticking in here is a stormy environment. And this tree not the type of tree, but the shape of the tree is like the one I can see out of my window right now. And sometimes our journal pages are like a collection of multiple experiences, right? So I've been watching this documentary that I don't know that I recommend, but it's about extreme weather. And so that was a thing that was happening in my life. And then this is a thing that was happening in my life. And then this is a thing that I'm thinking about with regard to my work. So there's something about this that all seems to relate together somehow. I don't know why, but she wants to be in there. This little, I guess because of the scissors. I don't know why she has scissors, but that feels like I can't just trash this little piece because she's got scissors in her hands and it seems like something important. So thing to know if you do incorporate these unflattering security badges into your journal is most often they're printed with thermal printers. So you don't want to let any solvent-based materials touch this. So that even includes something like matte medium. Mod Podge would probably be okay because it doesn't have a lot of other things in it. But if it has any other materials in it, you do just want to be careful. And I would just stay away from it entirely. So let this be, colored pencil is fine, crayon is fine, but I wouldn't touch it with anything else, just to make sure that you don't come back later and the badge that you would put in there on purpose to record the memory is gone. Okay. So we just have a little bit of time left, and I feel like this needs sometimes our journal pages are cryptic to everybody but us. And that is also why I love journaling, because it can be just for you. And even on pages that you share, they might be, the meaning of it is only fully known to you. This is from my tea yesterday. It says, what belongs to you shall come to you. Trying to make those words stand out a little bit more. Let's see if I can get this a little bit more wet. I might be able to get one more print from this leaf. Yeah, it's a little subtle one. It'll be interesting to see how that dries. Okay. All right, I'm going to pause for just a moment and see if there are any questions or any ideas that people have for our next session, which is next Monday. I'm always open to ideas and doing what people are interested in seeing more about. There's material that we got in this box that you want to play with a little bit more. I'm happy to do that. Or anything else that people want to talk about.
Hey, Erin, Sarah jumping in here. Yeah, so if you have a comment or a suggestion or anything like that, drop it in the chat. We've got about 5 minutes left. I have a feeling people are diligently working.
Diligently working.
Yeah.
Okay. I love that. All right. I'm going to set my little journal aside and go back to this one. And this page is pretty dry, so I can turn the page. Although I see that's not all the way stuck down. Okay. So I found something else, another piece of my work life has been very ephemera filled lately. So when we get packages at work that go to the package room, someone writes our name on it. and this package had fragile, and then someone had written Erin on it. So then it looked like the box was for fragile Erin. So I couldn't leave that there, right? I couldn't just recycle that box. Of course I had to peel that out. So that definitely needs to go in the journal. And having kept art journals for several decades now, my art journals have definitely held fragile Erin in various ways along the years. It's been a good home for fragile Erin. All right. So I almost always check the boxes before I recycle anything, because you just never know what might be there that's interesting to play with. And I think this is actually the perfect use case for at least one of the skeleton leaves. They are very fragile and delicate. So I like the idea of placing it there because, like the overlap idea, but you lose a little bit of it. If I put it over here, I haven't really figured out this composition yet, so I don't know what that's going to be. The other thing I could do is, so this is blockout white acrylic paint. And one thing you need to be careful of with the skeleton leaves is brushing too vigorously with whatever media you're putting them down with. So sometimes I like to stick them down first, let that layer dry, and then go over the top with something else. And then mark out a little bit of the fragility here so it's not quite so prominent. Oops. So I'm going to stick that down there. Then if you don't want to get your fingers covered in paint, you take a piece of wax paper, and kind of like what we did with the fern, I'm just going to press this down. And a little bit of white will come through the leaf, but it'll stick down there, and then I can go over it with Mod Podge or something else later.
I love that.
I think this is maybe the spot for these marching ladies. That way, it's kind of a fragile piece of paper, and I'm afraid it'll. Yeah, they feel like they want to march here somewhere. I don't want them to cover the leaf, but I like this part, so. I guess they could march this way.
Hey, Erin, we're actually at time.
Okay. Well, you'll have to tune into Mix to see where I decide to glue this down. If Sammy doesn't come in here and flutter her wings and blow it away. So. All right. Well, I really would love to see what you all got up to and what you're doing so far with our fall 2024 box. So please do share on Mix or tag us on Instagram. Would love to see it. And let us know how you are letting fall inspire your journaling.
Awesome. Thanks, Erin. We'll see you